I would encourage students, but really all of us, to think much less about what we're achieving and much more about who we're becoming. There's a philosopher, Dallas Willard, who taught at USC for almost 50 years and wrote a number of books. And Willard thought that this was Jesus' central preoccupation, that the main thing that Jesus gets, the main thing that Jesus' sort of attention is focused on is the kind of person you're becoming. And I just know so many. I know so many. You can lose sight of yourself chasing after these kinds of achievements and these things that you think will signify a kind of status or arrival, that don't have an attention to your heart, to your character. I find that if you're attentive to the kind of person you're becoming, and if you put effort toward that project, the fruit will speak for itself. I think that's very true for our politics as well. I think that we like to delude ourselves with thinking that we can achieve certain sort of like states of society through means that are inconsistent with those aspirations. Well, if we just make some compromises now, if we just cut some corners now, once this bill is passed, once this candidate is elected, then we'll be able to act in like real accordance with like the kind of nation we want to be, the kind of people we want to be. Life doesn't work. The human person doesn't work like that. Societies don't work like that. It's actually out of the overflow of the heart that the mouth speaks. It's actually out of the content of the character that you're shaping the world around you, and so that's a vital way, I think, that we are missing the placement of our hope, and achievements and these external things won't get us where we're trying to go.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So in your time as a Christian, you have that investment in that person that you're becoming rather than what you're achieving. So Hahrie, to my understanding, you're not a Christian, but you're a seeker. What has your seeking kind of taught you about hope? And is that process itself hopeful?
Yeah, so just to kind of give you a little bit of my background, like I had 11 years of Catholic school, and, Mass every Sunday, every Wednesday, prayer services on Friday. But then my parents also, we were raised like culturally very Buddhist at home because they had left Korea before, a lot of Christianity came through. And so it kind of raised us with a Buddhist tradition. So I sort of had both of those traditions, like both of those faith traditions very active in my life as a child. And then I think that I felt dissonant with the Catholic Church as I got older and went to high school. And so chose not to get confirmed and then have kind of been exploring different faith traditions. And when my children were younger, we raised them. We're living in California at a time where there were Buddhist temples in town, and so we took them to like Buddhist services on the weekends, and so I do characterize myself as still seeking, and I do think it's hopeful actually. To tie it to your question about how we think about our little hopes and our fundamental hopes. We were having this conversation at dinner, but there's like all this work out there right now and like happiness studies and like how to live a happy life and wellness stuff, and like all those things are obviously very important. And I'm not denigrating the importance of those things. I'm very pro happiness, but like when I think about like what I want for my children, it's like I would. Would I want my child to have a satisfied life? Like, yes, of course I want them to be satisfied. But what I really want is I want them to have a meaningful life, and what does it take to have a meaningful life? And I think that is certainly correlated with things that make you satisfied and happy, but it's not perfectly correlated with those things. And sometimes I think you need some friction to be able to find meaning, to create meaning. And being able to embrace that, I think, is important. I want my children to be able to embrace that. And I think that, like, you know, part of why I think characterizing myself as a seeker feels like not hopeful process, I guess, is because I feel like there's a constant process of exploration and renewal that comes along with that, that I think is important in a reflective life, I would say. And I think that's part of, to me, this question of, you know, you sort of phrase a question as like, you know, is there somewhere else we can put our hope if we're not putting it on the next achievement? And I think in some ways the challenge is, how do we figure out how to not have to put our hope outside of us all the time? You know, how do we begin to figure out how to find hope in our own capacity to act, in a way? And to tie it back to our conversation about politics, the word that I like to use to describe, you know, like ordinary people and how they relate to politics is constituents, right? Is that, you know, we can be, you know, sometimes we're called the public, sometimes we're called voters, sometimes we're called consumers, sometimes we're called whatever. But I think that what we should be is constituents. And the reason why I like that word is the Greek, I think it's the Greek, it might be Latin, I'm not sure. The Greek or Latin root of the word constituent is constare, which means to stand with, right? So if the Latin root of the word consumer, for example, is consumere, which means to burn up, right? So if I consume something, I take it, I use it, and I burn it up, right? So if I get happiness from having more things, I consume, you know, the goods that I purchase, the material goods that I purchase, but then they're burned up, right? So what do I have at the end? And I think that's where you get the kind of empty hope that you're talking about. But if I'm a constituent, then what I'm doing is I'm choosing to stand with somebody else, you know? And so in some ways, then I think to tie back to your question of hope is like, what does it take for me to become the kind of person who's going to choose to stand with other people and have other people choose to stand with me? You know, and I think that in a way is kind of the question of like, well, it's not just about what I have, but also about who I am, you know, that begins to move us, I think, closer to being the kind of constituents I think that we hope we can be.